You are listening to We Saw the Devil, an investigative and conversational true crime podcast that deep dives into fascinating criminal cases that are solved, unsolved, or ongoing. From America's Lori Vallow to Germany's Armin Meiwes, we examine and discuss the world's most shocking cases. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to follow us online. Check us out at WeSawTheDevil.com and We Saw the Devil on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget, you can become part of the show by backing us on Patreon. Hello, everyone. You are listening to We Saw the Devil. This is Robin, and I am here with, as promised, a discussion of week 2 of the Lori Vallow trial. Getting crazier by the week, and joining me this episode is Iris, whom many of you may remember from previous episodes. She is in her past, she was an autopsy technician, and she has come on numerous times in the past to discuss a variety of cases where her expertise has been incredibly helpful. Now, Iris and I recorded for almost 3 full hours, so sadly I did have to cut this episode into 2 pieces. So this morning, I'm actually releasing part 1. Later this evening, I'll release part 2. So they're actually both going to come out at the same, on the same day. But I'm sure you guys don't want like a 3-hour file on your Spotify, iTunes, however you're listening. So chopping that into 2 pieces for easier consumption. Before we get into it, again, don't forget you can check us out at WeSawTheDevil.com. From there, you can find us across all social media and so forth, as well as the Patreon if you're interested in financially backing the show. I'm just going to go ahead and air our discussion. And Iris, welcome back on. It has been far too long.
Oh, it has. Thank you for having me back. It's always so much fun to record with you and be on and just talk about all this stuff.
You have been my girl for like 15 years now. I can't believe how long I've actually known you, way back in the horror podcast days.
Right.
Talking about like horror movies with you and news and gory stuff. And then obviously the Lori Vallow case.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this case.
Oh, I know we have some thoughts. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Now, before we talk about week 2 of testimony, let's just talk about how you've been feeling overall.
About this whole thing?
About the whole thing so far. Just, initial observations, say week 1 leading up to this past week.
Okay, so week 1, I think Melanie's testimony. Yeah, so it just seems so obvious how she wants to separate herself from this whole thing. She was the third spoke in the wheel. I mean, the wheel had 5 spokes, and it was Chad, Lori, Melanie, Zulema, Alex. But she's trying to go like, oh, no. I was trying to be the brake. And I'm like, yeah, no, Melanie, you weren't. And you could tell too, I think we talked about this where, in some part in her testimony, and she was talking about it, and then she said, well, I mean, Lori.
Right?
I'm like, busted. Yeah, you were so much a part of this. And I am also one of the believers that feel that Melanie should also be in court.
No, I fully agree.
She was so involved in all of this. And to know all these things of, like all of a sudden you don't see JJ and the history of when she says zombie, what happens? Melanie should have gone to the police long, long before they came to her.
No, it's so true. And I know that hindsight is 20/20 and all of that. But like you just said, remember on the phone call, Tylee is dark, and then I'm not a zombie mom, or I'm not dark mom, that phone call.
Yeah.
And then Tylee's suddenly gone at BYU, supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
I feel exactly the same way that you do. I feel like there is absolutely no way that Melanie Gibb did not know, or at least have an inkling of an idea of what was transpiring at Lori's house. And it makes me upset that she is a witness.
I know, right? It's like you're sitting on the wrong side. You should be sitting next to her.
You should be sitting next to her along with, I believe, Melanie now Pulowski, formerly Boudreaux. I feel like she, even probably more so than Melanie Gibb, actually knew what was going on.
Oh, I completely agree with you. They had a daughter-mother relationship more than an aunt-niece relationship. I would have to say that Lori confided in her quite a bit. That's the thing about zealotry, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
You so believe that you are in the right that anything you do is not wrong.
She believed in Lori and Chad so much that Melanie literally left her kids back in Arizona and moved to Rexburg to be closer to the center of it.
Right, right. And again, when you feel so unimportant and second class, especially in religion, then all of a sudden you are told you're one of the chosen one, fuck, you're going to leave everything behind because you want to be that chosen one.
Yeah. I know that you and I have had some private conversations, and I mentioned it in the last episode too. You know, you have the Branch Davidians, People's Temple, basically any cult in the world. There's a checklist. There's an official checklist for cults. And one of the main items is the leader, aka Chad Daybell, tells you how special you are, tells you how unique, how the love bombing of cult leaders, which is very evident in this case. But before we get into it and talk about, all of these different things, I feel like we are going to have some hot button opinions in this episode.
Yes, we are.
So yes, we are. Want to let all of you know, prepare, strap in. It'll be okay. I promise. Yeah. Alrighty. So I've already talked about week 1. So I wanted to bring you in for week 2 because we had some really interesting witness testimony this week. We had,
oh my God, yes.
We had Zulema, I think is one of the big ones. Colby, couple police detectives, April Raymond, Lori's BFF from Hawaii. And then we even had someone get kicked out of the courtroom in dramatic fashion towards the beginning of the week. So we have some stuff to talk about, but let's start. There was no court on Monday, so let's start on Tuesday. So Tuesday, now what I'm really finding interesting is who's present. So on Tuesday, Annie Cushing was actually there, and both Kay and Larry Woodcock. Also, Chad's lawyer, John Pryor, bless him, is also present. Obviously, I'm assuming he's wanting to know which angle Lori's defense team is taking and going to better prepare for Chad's inevitable trial. But witness 1 on Tuesday morning was Zulema returned to the stand. If you recall, she was on the stand last week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was. And I don't know about you, but Zulema's testimony, or as a witness, I'd have to say, anytime that Archibald would clap at her, she would just clap back and twice as loud. I think the state or the prosecution putting Zulema on the stand was a huge, big power move. Mm-hmm. And for me, I think just the way Zulema's testimony or, witness, the way the prosecution was asking questions and the way I think they were kind of tossing the ball back at Archibald. And when he's talking to her, I think it pretty much shows where the prosecution is going with Lori Vallow. And I think it's trying to show what she did was not, as a parent, it's appalling, of course, right? As a human being, it is something that is awful. They, I think, are moving to the fact that this was a woman that was influenced by religion, and the things that she did were because of that influence. Mm-hmm. Depending on the jury and how well the media has already declared her guilty, I don't think she's going to get any of the murder charges. I think what they're going to do is it's going to be all fraud. And I think by doing this, the state is building a case of how Chad Daybell was the one that orchestrated everything.
See, I'm actually split on the conspiracy and murder charges. I 100% believe she's going to get fraud. I feel like that is nailed down. In terms of conspiracy versus murder, I'm teetering on the edge on conspiracy, but we still have a lot of evidence to go. I do feel like they are going to turn over the mega load of text messages between her and Chad, maybe some phone calls, communications there. I do feel like, situationally speaking, that it's very obvious to be like, the bitch was in on it. You know what I mean? Like, it's very obvious that I think that you can make an argument. However, not in a legal sense.
Yes,
there's always going to be a shadow of a doubt that she was involved, right?
Exactly.
And This pisses off everyone. When I try to go, which I stopped a long time ago, I stopped interacting in groups. Colette, all of you guys from True Crime Underground, I love all of you so much, but I just can't take the people who interact and debate on this case because they get so aggressive if you don't, have one particular viewpoint. My viewpoint, Iris, is very similar to yours. I believe that Lori Vallow was a horrible human being. I believe that she is a narcissist, a clinical narcissist. I believe potentially there's talk of schizophrenia. She is, to me, honestly, she's massively exhibiting like histrionic personality disorder, red flag all over the place, like Soviet parade level of histrionic. But I'm not a psychiatrist and I don't believe in armchair diagnosis. But to be fair, all I'm saying is she is clearly a very, very mentally ill woman. Even her own family said that she had these beliefs years ago, years before she met Chad. She was obsessed with the apocalypse, the end times, things like that. Before she met Chad, she was moving more to the extreme with those beliefs. So at the end of the day, I believe that she was a religious zealot, and Chad saw a hot blonde that he was like, man, I was a loser and a chump in high school. I haven't really experienced the world experience much. Here's a hot blonde. And so he utilized his standing as an LDS author to tell her how special she was, how beautiful she was, how she's a goddess, all of this
I know.
love bombing bullshit. But because Lori Vallow is so incredibly mentally ill and a zealot, I believe that she internalized that as reality. And she believed it. Every single person, whether it's Zulema, Melanie Gibb, anybody, said that Lori 100% actually believed Chad's bullshit. Actually believed it, like true believer level. I truly believe that Chad Daybell orchestrated, like you said. I believe that he was behind it. Honestly, I am against the death penalty. I was actually really happy to see that Lori Vallow, the death penalty was taken off the table with her, because I don't believe that severely mentally ill people should get the death penalty. Chad Daybell, he can fry for all I care. He can fry. Does anyone in Idaho need someone to flip the switch? Like, I am a complete pacifist. I'm anti-war. I'm anti-death penalty. I would flip his switch so I could use the outlet to charge my phone. What I'm seeing, and I'm sure you see it too, is everyone says that Lori was all behind it.
Right. Well, okay, so let's look at that, right? So throughout history, I mean, from the very beginning, Medea, Jezebel, it's always that the harlot mother. Okay. It's always and even the French have a saying, cherchez la femme, find the woman. Anytime a man has any type of calamity, find the woman. Who's the one that started everything in the first place? It was Eve, right? So in our way of thinking, and this is going to be very, very unpopular here, I don't care, the patriarchy. And I don't mean the patriarchy as, all men, but society has been pushed, and this has been pushed mostly by religious control, not by believing in God and stuff, but by religious control, that men are infallible because they're in charge. They don't make the mistakes because they're in charge. And so if there's any trouble, well, who else is left? The woman. She's the one that's always slow. She's the one that's always emotional. She's the one that does this. So anytime a man of any type of leadership position, even Chad, you're going to have that thought, right? You're going to be, well, it's because the woman.
And, we see this so often. Also the legal system, too. One of my absolute favorite bands is Noir Désir, which is a French band. And the lead singer was married to a supermodel wife, and they were kind of like France's it couple, right? He would cheat on her constantly or whatever. Anyway, he got mad at her one night in their hotel room, and he ended up shaking her against the bed frame so violently he murdered her.
Oh, fuck.
When they got to court, they were like, yeah, it's kind of her fault. He got a little jail time so it wouldn't piss everybody off, but like literally the court blamed the dead woman that he murdered for upsetting him.
Right.
And they called it, crime of passion. There's a crime of passion of men murdering, say, their wives or girlfriends because they did cheat on them. And men have gotten completely off all throughout history.
Right.
I guess like one final piece is that it's taboo because Lori was a mother, and women are supposed to be kind, sweet, nurturing, quiet, protectors, care for the children. So anytime there is just this uprooting of that kind of fabric, in cases like this, people blame the woman immediately.
Yeah, well, because it's an easy target. right? It's an easy target. The men are doing everything they can to be able to, move things forward and protect and all this and provide.
Yeah, exactly. And like, guys, we're not saying she's innocent. I want her to spend every last breath that she takes in prison. But we cannot deny, at least in my opinion, that she is incredibly mentally ill. Yes, she's simultaneously a shitbag, but also religious zealotry exists.
It does.
It exists.
It does. And here in the United States, we believe zealotry comes from the Middle East, when we have so much zealotry here in the United States embedded within us that we can't see the forest for the trees. That's basically it.
Yeah. I mean, look at the FLDS. Look at all the far right branches of religion, far left too. They go to extremes. So anytime you have an extreme, bad shit's going to happen.
Yeah. It is.
And the big piece that ties it all together, at least in my opinion, I said this in the last episode too, is groups especially that focus on the end times. They use that to justify horrible actions and behaviors, usually by the cult leader, right?
Right.
And that's how Chad got a lot of people. That's, Zulema in control of the elements. And Lori was his goddess.
Right. I know. It was kind of like, I'm sorry to say this, but it was kind of like an anime.
Yeah, I actually have in my notes that I've written it in the notes 50 times over. Chad just needed to come out and be like, I like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
And I want to join a local guild and a local troop or tabletop center and live out my Dungeons and Dragons fantasy. Maybe that would have saved some lives. I don't know, but
I cast a spell on you.
But there was one part, we'll get to it later, I'm sure, but Zulema, especially when she's talking about casting out demons and things like that, and I'm just like, do you need a reroll? Like,
yeah, it's kind of like you rolled a 1.
Yeah, right. Oh man.
Oh my gosh. But on the zealotry thing, and then we'll get back to Zulema and her testimony, because I think it's amazing testimony. I mean, it's called the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, right? And most of the time, the later days is about the end times and about the perilous times filled with great calamities. So the Mormon religion is kind of like, has a lot of the apocalypticism in its beliefs already. Yep. So yeah, it primes someone to join groups like Preparing the People.
Yeah, the Latter-day Saints. I mean, it's in the name, And it's very, very, very common. A lot of Mormon LDS businesses specialize in prepping. You're supposed to have at least a year's worth of food or something. A lot of the people, that's very mainstream and very common.
Very, very common.
Yeah, a couple LDS friends that I have, they are preppers. They're not what mainstream society would consider preppers of, men with military hats and guns with bunkers buried, shipping containers buried in their backyard, ready to take on whoever. But
those are other zealots.
Those are other types of zealots. We're going to prep, have a year's worth of food in my pantry, and we're good. It's fascinating. And I think that part of the reason, especially in the very beginning, why a lot of people got so caught up in the trial is the influence of Mormonism and LDS on the case, potentially. And remember in the very beginning, and I was fascinated, we're going to get here to this point today. Remember when they initially thought that the kids were in an LDS bunker up north in Montana? All of that fed into it, right? So it's just such a fascinating case. But I just wanted to be forthright about my thoughts on it, as far as I want her to rot in jail, rot in prison until the day she dies. It takes a lot, guys, to upset me in the sense of letting me go against my very vehement anti-death penalty nature. And I'm just like, fry him.
You're right. No, I believe so. And I guess the thing is also, we have to remember as a society that there is a difference between justice and law.
Yes.
Right? So justice would be hang the bitch.
Like, I can't think of a better example of that than Casey Anthony, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, very, very much so. Right? Everybody wants her to fucking fry. But because we have a legal system, that legal system could not find enough evidence to fry the bitch.
And that's why I think people get so upset when the wheels of justice turn slowly, or, in the Moscow, Idaho 4 case, how
Right,
police
right,
weren't
right,
releasing
right.
a lot of information just on top of each other every day, especially with the advent of the internet and everything. Like, I feel people want constant updates, constant information, and that harms investigations so much.
And I'm not saying that our legal system is perfect, because there are so many injustices that we see in our own legal system that it's disgusting. But again, we have to remember that we have that system. It's not a system of justice. It's a system of laws. I really, really hope that, she gets charges and gets sent to jail for 25, 30 years with no chance of parole.
Yeah. No, I completely concur. And that's why in the opening statements in almost every single big murder trial or trial in general, the defense will always almost trot out and say something to the effect of, it's the prosecution's job to prove it without a shadow of a doubt. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's their job. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it is. It's the state's job to prove that Lori Vallow is guilty of conspiracy, murder, and fraud.
Yes.
And I guess we can go ahead and just kind of pivot right into week 1, because
Yeah.
I want to talk about Zulema.
Yes.
And my very first point I'm going to make, I see a lot of this talk online. I try to stay out of mess. I don't like mess. I like other people's messes, but I don't like mess and getting involved in drama. But I see people talk about Zulema's voice, her baby voice. And they are saying that she's just trying to make herself seem dumb and uneducated and baby-like, and it's just all manipulation. I fully, in my heart and soul, do not believe that to be true. Way in the beginning of the case, when Zulema's name popped up right after Alex Cox keeled over, I did some research on Zulema and found a previous employer. I spent 2 hours on the phone with her previous boss, got a lot of information on Zulema, and she was actually very close friends with Zulema. This was when she was doing the cuddling work and energy work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Zulema has always sounded like this. Zulema has always sounded like this, and she has a very, 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 very sad life story. And I don't know how many of you know that, but the baby voice, the baby talk, that kind of demeanor is a huge sign of childhood sexual trauma.
Really? I did not know that.
I'm not saying 100% that is what it is, but I just want everyone to be aware that that is a huge signal and signifier of childhood sexual abuse, is women when they, have that high-pitched projected voice. It's almost kind of, yeah. So Lori has it. Zulema has it. Pointing it out.
Well, a good point, though. Good point. I would have to understand why, because when put in a situation of stress, you are going to revert to where you could hide away, and that would be in that childlike state.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's exactly why people do it. And that is a very, very big signifier of childhood sexual abuse, which confirmed on Zulema's end. Zulema was 100% abused as a child. And then there's a lot of talk too, right, about the Cox family. Barry Cox in particular sounds like a monster. There's talk, that Barry did unspeakable things to Summer and Lori, potentially Stacy as well. So I'm not saying it happened. I'm just saying, like, to other women out there who listen, who are into true crime and, all this kind of stuff, like, let's not be so hard on the voices.
Yeah. It so sucks, because we as women are so ready to bounce and just destroy another woman because we think they're sounding weak, when instead of helping her not to sound weak, we want to take her out.
That is really sad. I think Zulema has a lot to say.
Yeah, she had.
So how do you feel about, let's just kind of start with her testimony last week, like the previous week, and then coming into her returning to the stand. How do you feel about Zulema?
Okay, so Zulema, I think Zulema was a spoke in the wheel, yes. Maybe she should be sitting behind Lori also, but when you start looking at her testimony and what the things that she did, right? Reiki and all new age kind of woo-woo kind of stuff, as I like to call it. She is a very powerful witness for the state right now, because she is just given facts. She's saying, well, Chad and Lori did this and they loved bombed me, and then they were trying to convince me that this, and then they told me I had these awesome elemental powers and I was raining fire and all this other stuff. you can clearly see how easily somebody who has already been traumatized can be love bombed and convinced of any fucking thing that you want them to think.
Absolutely.
And she is a prime example of what happens when somebody who has gone through so much tragedy in their life gets told, hey, you want to be one of the cool kids? Come join us. But then she slowly starts realizing that being one of the cool kids means that you're going to be one of the mean girls. And I don't think she liked that.
I don't, what I gathered in my interview with Zulema's friend, who knew Zulema for 10 years, is that Zulema is a very, very, actually, like, she's a sweet person. She's good to her friends. She was married multiple times. Each and every husband that she had beat the shit out of her. Each and every one. An insane amount of physical abuse. Some other pieces too, but she got involved in energy work, and it makes sense that she would be brought into the love bombing. Like, that totally makes sense that she would want to be special in some way. She wants to be loved. She wants to have a sort of family. And Chad and Lori offered that to her in spades, along with Melanie Gibb.
Right, right. And, the thing that she was saying about how when you feel sick or bad and it's because you're being attacked, it's not original to just Chad, because there are some Christian faiths that if you're poor, or if you're not feeling well, or if this or that, it's demons attacking you, or you're not right with God. So again, it was prime. I don't know, kind of like Zulema was prime real estate for Chad and Lori.
There's some people who are just easy pickings, and I think that Zulema, especially, was one of those.
Yeah, and not to say that she was dumb or an idiot. It's just that she was so primed already by what she was doing and she believed in. Taking that one extra step of thinking that, you have the power of fire, or that somebody can cast demons away and call you and say, hey, you're good now. I mean, that's what she was doing with Reiki, right? I mean, she would lay hands and change the vibrations of your body. Well, what Chad was saying wasn't much different. So why wouldn't she believe it?
I mean, Chad was essentially creating a sort of fucked up LDS extreme Captain Planet, right? Like, they each had like almost their own kind of rings, like Zulema, coming forward.
Zulema had the red ring.
Yeah, she had the red ring. I control the elements. It's no wonder how she got so sucked into that. But what I found so fascinating about Tuesday, the 18th, April 18th, that testimony as a whole. So they finally got around to Alex's death, right?
Oh my God, this was awful. I had tears in my eyes.
Something that I've always wondered, and I think a lot of people have wondered, did Chad tell them to get married? Like, did he direct that? And
I think he did, to tell you the truth.
I do too. Zulema said that her first day with Alex was in August of 2019. They dated a few times, but had their first kiss in Halloween of 2019. So they went on a couple dates. They met in August, went on a couple dates. They spoke on the phone a lot. They read the same books. They got to know each other. And then Alex proposed to her on November 7th when she came to visit him in Rexburg. She said, quote, Alex was very clear that he was looking for a relationship and he wanted to get married. I also wonder, though, so I do feel like this was directed, but I wonder if Chad directed Alex to woo her and propose and whatnot, rather than sitting them both down together and be like, hey, fuckers, get married.
Right. I think that's probably what happened. But if you remember, also in her testimony, she was saying that Chad kept telling her that she needed to get married again.
Yep.
And so he was priming her up too. And they had a blessing from Chad together. Yep. One was for Alex, one was for her. And I think within that, I think he was trying to make that bond between Alex and Zulema.
And Chad and Lori both kept pressuring her to move to Rexburg. Like, they were trying to centralize everyone in Rexburg.
Why the fuck Rexburg? But who knows?
For the 144K, you're going to show up.
Right. And I can't wait to get into David Warwick's testimony.
Like, it was just really sad hearing Zulema. I do feel like Zulema loved Alex to a degree. I don't think that she was madly in love with him or anything, at least from what I'm gathering.
Yeah, she had some feels.
Yeah, she had some feels. And she said, I went to work early December 12th and Alex was fine. And when I came home, Alex was laying on the floor of my bathroom dead. And then the paramedics came and started working on him. And then they took him to the emergency room and they worked on him for about an hour. And they brought me back into the room where he was connected to machines. They were doing CPR on him. And then after many efforts to revive him, I had to give the okay to have the machines turned off. Direct quote. First of all, can't imagine. Secondly, though, that entire do you remember? Did you watch the video of that the day that Alex died back in the day when it was released?
Mm-hmm.
That was fascinating. Like her response to all of that, her anger at officers too. Remember, her daughter was there. Like Zulema was actually angry.
Well, yeah, and I think she would have been angry. And yes, she has every reason to, because here she is. She left him. He was perfectly fine. Nothing was wrong with him. And then all of a sudden she comes back. She's being told, first of all, her son's like, yeah, I'm not touching him. And then, you have all these officers and it's kind of like all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put him back together again.
Yeah.
And then, of course, how could Chad let this happen?
Yeah, I can actually absolutely see that. And this is something that I highlighted from her testimony too, is she was texting back and forth with Chad and she was in pain. I believe it was her shoulder. But going back to your point of where they believe that every physical ailment was the cause of a demon or negative entity, Chad responded and said, quote, "Hi, Zulema. I have captured and removed the evil spirits that were attacking you. I have removed the weapons and am healing the damage." I mean, if that's not some Dungeons and Dragons,
he rolled a 20.
He rolled a 20 on that one. Oh my God. It's like a game of magic too. But she was completely into it. She quite literally thought that he had the power to do that. I mean, she even says, I really trusted these people. She believed that Chad had a veil and that he could see over to the other side. Chad said that Zulema was constantly being guided by angels. Lori told her that she was having personal conversations with Jesus Christ. Zulema admits, I trusted them.
Well, yeah, and why wouldn't you? And here, this relationship that Chad is trying to form between Lori and Zulema, telling her that she was mother and daughter, and at 14 she was raped and killed, and so was her mom, which was Lori, and that's why they're back together again. It's unreal, and I think at some point Chad and Lori were starting to lose faith in Melanie because
Gibb or Pulaski?
Gibbs, because they didn't want to talk to Zulema about her special gifts and the things that they wanted to love bomb her with in front of Melanie. And it's probably because they had told Melanie the same shit.
Oh, 100%. Chad called Zulema the goddess of the earth. I mean, imagine being a broken person, sexually abused, horribly abused physically as a child. You're kind of scraping by, doing the best you can. You get into a series of abusive relationships. You have no self-esteem. You're scraping by. And then here comes this important author, right? Who you perceive to have a lot of respect and success. And he is saying, you are the goddess of the earth. You have a very special mission. Jesus Christ himself told me you have a special mission to fulfill. It's just for you. Then Chad and Lori, Lori's super attractive and personable. You're so special. You're so special. You have special powers. I mean, Zulema even admits it made me feel really, really good and special.
Yeah. And that's all she wanted.
Sometimes that's all it takes for people, especially very, very broken people, is for someone to come in and love bomb and make them feel special. That's it.
Yeah, and I mean, Zulema also mentioned that, Alex was an angel in his prior probations. And when I heard that, I was like, I'm sorry, what? How do you, okay.
Another way to justify evil behavior, right? Because Alex has been a horrible human being since he was a child, apparently. Very just aggressive and lacks empathy and the whole bit. So when Chad comes in and is like, Alex, you are the angel who had come to Saul before he became Paul. You were the one to speak to him and blah, 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 blah. He was an angel that had appeared to Joseph Smith, which is huge, right?
Oh, that is huge. That is big time.
And that he had unmasked Satan in another creation. And that's why Satan had so much animosity towards him. Because Alex had, gambling addiction, sex addiction, according to his ex-wife, potentially was into minors. There's also some talk about him doing drug and sex trafficking stuff when he would take trips down to South America. He was not a good dude. And this is textbook cult. Textbook cult.
Yeah, it is. It very much so, because, you need that prime. And by calling him the protector of Lori, now you have somebody that is willing to do anything for Lori.
He had some guilt, and, what better way to make it all better than by saying he's the exalted one? You're special.
Here's the way to make up for it.
Exactly. Hey, here's the way to make up for it. Kill these 2 children so that we can continue on our mission.
Oh, God.
Like it's awful. But I do trust Zulema way more than I trust Melanie Gibb.
Right. Oh, and what did you think about her saying, but you had mentioned this last time about, Zulema being there when Lori said, "What an idiot, can't do anything right." I was like, really? Oh my God. So, okay, again, State trying to show that, yes, she was part of the conspiracy, but unless you show me receipts, again, as Archibald said, hearsay.
Exactly. When I say that Lori's mentally ill, I'm not saying that that's an excuse, right?
No.
A lot of people have mental illness, and they are wonderful, absolutely upstanding, outstanding humans that contribute ungodly amounts to society. Lori was not one of those people. She can still be a religious zealot, right? Like, completely be a religious zealot and think, fuck, our mission is not going to go off. He's an idiot. Like, it could be in that context. You know what I mean?
Exactly. No, good point. Very good point.
So I see a lot of people using that as a point of, no, that's her being involved. I'm like, no, she still could have been framing it in her head that, oh my God, our mission is not coming into fruition and Alex is messing it all up. So,
yep. Good point. All right. So Colby broke my heart a little, just the whole thing of, you can hear that he is already starting to break down as he's looking at the pictures and talking about how he felt about Tylee and about JJ and the relationships that they had and stuff. And it was a little heart-wrenching to hear, but then when they start asking questions and he starts answering things, and it was like getting money, and I'm like, what? Why is he getting money from his sister through Lori? And then I'm like, oh, did Lori not want Charles Vallow to know that she was sending him money? Maybe. I don't know. But just the whole thing. And then, of course, when that phone call.
Oh, God, that was heart-wrenching.
That fucking phone call. And I know that Archibald, when he was doing the cross-examination, was trying to show she was a mother, though, right? She took care of Tylee. She always made sure that you had everything you needed. She would send you money. She taught you the good things, right? She taught you about God. She taught you about this, about that. She didn't teach you, all the woo-woo zombie shit. And I think what Archibald was trying to do was, yeah, it sucks what you think she might have done, but she was always a good mother. She was a good mom to you. And I love when they brought up that Colby had the $1 million insurance on Lori. Everything was going to Colby.
Yep.
Which was interesting and it was great, but then does that mean because JJ and Tylee weren't going to be around?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? It absolutely makes you wonder. Yeah, he broke my heart. He almost immediately just broke down on the stand. Especially when he identified the pictures of Tylee and JJ. That's his sister. That's, my brother. It was interesting that Lori would send him money. But you know what? Honestly, I moved to Maine pretty soon after I got out of college. And I love Maine, but it's a mess. And I needed some financial help from my parents too.
Yeah.
But I did it until I got on my feet. And I feel like Colby is, the kind of guy who just kind of, if you're in his immediate friend group, he's like, hey, can you spot me a 50?
Right.
He doesn't have his stuff, I think, fully together, which, my God, look at his childhood. Lori may have done a lot for him, but she also
did a lot of trauma to that poor kid.
She did so much trauma. Charles Vallow too. Let's not kid ourselves. People want to paint Charles Vallow out like he was this impeccable god of a person. But the trauma that Joseph Ryan apparently physically abused him, then there was Lori, then there was, Charles Vallow, who he did love and respect as a father figure. That human being has so much trauma already, and then here we are in this mess. So it doesn't necessarily seem terribly odd to me that Lori would send Colby the amounts of money. She paid for his car payment and other things too. I think what's just so sad, He called and talked to Lori on September 8th, and he heard Tylee in the background. That was while they were at Yellowstone National Park. They were in the gift shop. So he quite literally heard Tylee speak in the background, and she was likely murdered that night. I mean,
that's fucked up. That is so fucked up, dude.
And then, after September, he continued to receive money from a couple different accounts registered to Lori. What also amazed me, not trying to fast forward, was just the sheer number of accounts all these people had. Everybody had like 20 accounts each.
Crazy, isn't it?
Just what? Tylee had like 5 or 6. Lori had like 5 or 6. Lori had like 10. Some with Alex and some with Tylee. And then everybody has like 50 financial accounts.
It's almost like laundered money.
Right? It seems that way. It's like, why? I have, a couple, like 2 checkings, a savings, and, my credit card. What in the world? But I found it really sad. He said that he talked to Lori on the phone, every month or 2 months. Tylee was murdered. JJ was murdered. And then he called Lori and she disconnected her phone.
Yeah. Well, she didn't want to be found.
Nope. From her own child, from her own beloved son. She just disconnected her phone and just went about her business.
And probably because, speculation here, probably because Chad directed her to.
Yep.
Probably telling her, he's dark. He's going dark. You need to separate yourself from him.
Yeah, because remember Colby's wife, Chad marked her as dark.
Yes.
But it's just so sad. He had so much trauma as a child, and then here we are here. She disconnected her phone, moved. But I found that a lot of interesting information came out of Archibald's cross-examination of Colby, that we learned. And this did come up previously when a lot of, I think it was Pretty Lies and Alibis or whatever, like that other podcast and channel, but they got some records that stated Tylee had pancreatitis all the time. Like she often had to go to the hospital because of pancreatitis. And so a lot of people are wondering if Lori poisoned her.
Well, for pancreatitis, maybe the kid was pre-diabetic.
Would that cause symptoms of pancreatitis?
Yeah, it would cause symptoms of pancreatitis. Also your blood sugar's going stupid, from very low to very high. All kinds of reasons.
I think a lot of that comes from the fact that Charles Vallow and Lori used to drug the kids to knock them out and put them to sleep. So I think people are kind of pivoting from that of, if they can do that, they can, Lori can poison. And then also Lori did threaten to poison Charles Vallow.
Yes, there is that. And, it's the typical, it's the way women do things, right?
It is the way that women work. I mean, women are notorious for being poisoners.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Lucretia Borgia.
Right? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make it my absolute mission to see what tests, toxicology reports can be run on various stages of decomposition.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I need to know this. And I'm going to work to make that happen over the next month or so, because I really want to know, not to give any of you listeners any ideas of how to get away with anything, but to find out, what kind of poisons or what tests can and cannot be completed, because that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, another piece is Colby said that his relationship with Alex was minimal, and said that he was odd, crude, kind of funny, but odd. And that tracks, right, with what we know about Alex.
Right, he was that uncle.
The creepy. I mean, he was the as most women know, the creepy uncle. Colby actually left the stand, and then when the call was playing, but then came back to answer some additional questions after. But God, just so sad. I hope that he can find some semblance of peace. His entire life and family has been destroyed because of this.
Yeah, and I like how this state played this, because not only because it was just so tragic and the tragedy, and you can feel the emotion. This was not play acting. This was hardcore emotion coming out of Colby. But they were trying to show the jury, yeah, this lady was influenced by, this zealot or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm going to call him a con man. But it was contrary to the beliefs that she grew up with, and could not answer her son when he would say, in the name of Jesus Christ, you actually believe what you did was right. And she could not give him an answer. All she could say was, you'll find out in the end. Because Chad totally has convinced this woman, doesn't matter what she does, she's a goddess.
Yep.
And when she stands before Christ, as the Mormon religion believes, she will not be judged. Because, Christ is going to go, oh, no, Lori, you don't stand down there with that crowd. You're up here with us. That's what she's expecting.
And people are interpreting, and this is what I don't understand. And, if you're one of the followers of this case that just vehemently disagrees with me, please, I want to know why. Like, I want to know your reasoning behind this. I'm really fascinated by it. But, like, if that jail call with Colby wasn't just more proof to me that she is completely off her rocker. And that like guys, this is why she spent so many different times, being deemed incompetent. What kind of person, their oldest son comes to her, knows that his siblings are dead, and she laughs. She completely throws him off, pushes him off. She doesn't, her video and her camera isn't on, and she's laughing. She's like, you'll see. Like, she is not in her right mind. Period. Full stop. Like, she's not in reality.
No. Not at all. I mean, she's probably still convincing herself that she is having visits with Chad.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure there's a portal in her cell,
Because I'm sure she can create them on her own now because she is so exalted.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. But that's just more.
And yeah, it is. And it's fucking sad. We are not making fun. We are not making fun of her mental state. We are not making fun of who she is or how she is. It sounds like it, but it's not, because it's her reality.
Yeah.
And it's fucking sad.
You know what? I'm gonna make everyone hate me with my next comment. So the texting case that happened in Boston, Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy. A lot of people, because of the nature of her text to him, right? Kill yourself, go kill yourself, get that fucking car, you're a loser, but whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, all those string of texts. That case, just like the Vallow case, is a case of two people, perfect storm. Conrad Roy and Michelle Carter both were incredibly depressed human beings that fed off of each other. He basically manipulated and abused her in a lot of ways. Read the whole text transcripts of the thousands of them. But it's just that one quirky, once in a lifetime moment where two people just so toxic and horrible for each other come together in the perfect storm and chaos erupts. And I fully believe that in Lori Vallow's case, I think that if it wasn't Chad Daybell, it would have been somebody else. Maybe none of this would have happened in any capacity, right? But because it was Chad Daybell, and he, for all intents and purposes, was pretty much a loser, living a very quiet, boring life, trying to get popular off of copying Julie Rowe's belief system and creating his own. I mean, he literally LARPed and created this fantasy world so he could fuck a woman. Like, quite literally.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a chance. It's just like this just weird fate thing brought them together. And it's so weird.
And it is. But like you said, it was a perfect storm. And it's very easy to do with the case in Boston. When someone threatens you with taking their life time and time and time again, you get to the point where you're like, fine, go fucking do it then.
Or especially if they abuse you and say the fact that you will not support my suicide means you don't love me. You're a piece of shit. You want me to live? Why? You want me to be depressed? You want me to be suicidal and unhappy? Michelle, you are the reason. Like, you don't love me. If you loved me, you would support me wanting to die. Imagine being brainwashed with that shit for months at a time.
But, it's her fault.
Yep, exactly. But it's solely her fault. She's evil. She's evil incarnate. That's what you hear all the time.
You're starting to see Lori in a different light. And again, please don't think that we don't believe that she is a piece of shit of a person. Yep. But we are starting to see her in a different light. And it's very easy to get caught up in the court of media. But you really have to look at the facts.
Jodi Arias, right? Jodi Arias was mentally ill. She was needy. She was a lot of things. But Travis Alexander abused the shit out of her. Yep. He did. Like, he absolutely did. She's right where she should be. Period. Full stop. 100%. Glad she's in prison for the rest of her life. But, we need to stop. It's what's her face? Nancy Grace. It's like the Nancy Grace effect, right? For good TV and for the clicks and the clickbait and the headlines, it makes a lot more money when you pop a picture of Lori Vallow up on the screen. Taught mom, killer mom.
Or Doomsday
Mom. Yeah. And I remember when the Jodi Arias case, because I religiously watched the Jodi Arias case. They actually, one of the pictures was that the studio used on the Nancy Grace show was a Travis Alexander with angel wings.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
I know. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just all of these different angles and opinions and framing of court cases and whatnot. It just creates this toxic cesspool online when everyone comes together to try to discuss it. But I try to look past all of that and just, analyze the case for what it is. Everyone is a complex person, right? Every single human being in this world is complex. We're not just all like typically one note. Like you said, we're starting to see this situation kind of play out, honestly, how I thought it actually was in reality. But now it's like, God, this is just sad.
It is. It's extremely sad.
But next up on Tuesday was Mark Sorry. He was a special agent with the Social Security Administration. And to your point, I think she's going to be nailed for the Social Security fraud. I mean, there's no way she's not.
No, yeah. There's no denying any of this because Archibald doesn't even cross-examine sometimes.
Like, more on that in a moment. But JJ was receiving $1,900 per month in benefits. Tylee was receiving $1,800 a month in benefits. Lori, when she got her apartment and the paperwork, noted that she had about $5,000 worth of income. And then both of those payments were suspended in January of 2020 because the children were missing. And Sorry said that Lori Vallow never reported her kids missing and that she just remarried and then up and moved to Hawaii. So, I mean, pretty open and shut case, right?
Right. And every single thing. Well, she moved. She didn't say anything. She got married. That would have disqualified her. And, well, she couldn't produce the kids, which was the main reason.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
But then after that, we had Chuck Consitis, who was a detective with the Rexburg Police Department. And he, again, this is also what blew my mind because of the financials, just how many freaking accounts.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing I noted with his testimony is that Alex Cox got a $21,000 loan from the Lending Club in early August of 2019. He then purchased 46 guns and ammunition and then put like $4,000 or $5,000 in another account. Why?
Because the 144,000 need to be able to protect themselves from the calamities that are coming.
So was Alex acting more in your belief? Do you think he was kind of like the protector, security person of the group?
Mm-hmm. I think so. He was going to be their war chief. He was going to be the Secretary of Defense, I guess you could go.
That's terrifying. That is terrifying.
But remember, he was the angel, and what do angels do? Angels protect, and they fight evil. So he was getting primed. He was primed for that. I mean, this is Waco type of shit.
That's what I think a lot of people, Waco, Branch Davidians, y'all, very similar. A lot of David Koresh believed in the apocalypse and all this other shit. Like, I'm actually not fully convinced that Chad didn't only want to be with Lori. I have no doubt in my mind that had this group not killed the children or, let's say, been able to exist for a good bit longer, Chad would have had multiple wives. Multiple.
Oh, yeah. Zulema, Melanie, Lori.
Unless you have any other points, the final point that I would like to talk about on Tuesday is the fact that someone was actually, you can hear it on the court audio, removed from the courtroom for taking pictures.
That was hilarious, dude.
All I will say is that it couldn't have happened to a nicer human being. I know that they've, talked about it on their side and given the reasons.
Sarcasm.
Definite sarcasm there. Yeah, that was interesting to hear on audio. So Wednesday, Rexburg Police Detective, again, Chuck Consitis. And this brings it up to the conspiracy part or how deep Lori was involved in it, because it was Chad and Lori trying to run a house in Hawaii, right? And the ad said, we are interested in seeing this property. Would the owners be interested in leasing this property to a clean couple with no pets or children? That hurts my heart.
Yeah. That here again, state trying to show, yes, this happened, but who orchestrated it?
This is where we also learned that officers followed up on a tip that the kids were in a compound in Montana. I remember when that was happening and people online were talking about, they're, in some LDS compound up in Montana. They believe the end of the world's coming. And remember how sweet summer child. We were also naive back before the kids were found. Like I did. I held on to a shred of hope.
Yeah, and being part of the work that I used to do before I came up here to Washington.
And tell everyone what you used to do, Iris, because some may not know you from before.
So I was an autopsy technician for a medical examiner's office in Utah, and coming from that background when and this is no joke. I know people are going, "Oh yeah, right, you got this for 48 hours," but no, it is true. After 48 hours, especially with children, it's one of three things happens, and I find the statistics interesting because it is 33.3, 33.3, and 33.3. That's the percentage. They're either found, they either have been kidnapped, found, and abused, or they are dead. And once those 48 hours have passed, those numbers start shifting, and then it's being found just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I was thinking, yeah, those kids they're dead. I, like you, was holding on to some hope that maybe they were on this compound, because when they're saying, hey, compound, again, not picking on you guys, but I do know of people, of kids, of Mormon parents and families that had been sent to pioneer camps, which are basically correctional camps trying to beat religion into you. And that's basically what they are. They're correctional camps. So thinking, oh, well, then maybe they are alive in one of these camps. But no, sadly enough.
We were so naive back in the beginning. Oh, man.
Very, very naive.
It was really interesting hearing that confirmation of that. But something else, too, that actually makes me kind of angry is, and I know a lot of people have talked about this, though, is that the fact that Melanie Boudreau, formerly Melanie Boudreau, now Melanie Pulowski, has not been in court. Like, nothing has happened to her at all. But he confirmed, Detective Consitis confirmed that Lori actually spent a lot of time with Melanie Boudreau after kids were murdered. Now, considering the fact that they were so close, so close, you cannot convince me that Melanie did not have an inkling of what happened, especially since Melanie was so trusted that she, was aware that Alex Cox tried to kill her ex-husband. You can't convince me that she didn't know that the kids were murdered.
I agree with you 100%. She did know that something was going on. Yeah, especially if you have that mother-daughter type of relationship, you would confide in each other. And I'm sure that she felt that that Lori was doing the right thing, and Melanie was there right beside her. And
let's talk about that zealotry, y'all, because don't forget, Melanie Boudreau was going to temple 5 times a freaking day. Her house turned into a disgusting cesspit. Like, there was literal feces and rotten food in the hallways on the floor. She spent half her time, she'd converted her closet into like a prayer room. Did she have a portal? Who knows? But Melanie Boudreau was a zealot. 100% off the deep end zealot. Everyone confirms that. So why wouldn't Lori confide in her if they had the same end goal? They're part of the same group, right? And Melanie moved to Rexburg.
Exactly, she did. With her children and husband?
No. Why hasn't... I understand sometimes that prosecutors want to go after the big fish, as it were. You have Lori and Chad and the children, all of that. But I would really love to see some of these outlying people get some good old-fashioned justice.
That would be... Okay, see, again, we are wanting justice, but in the eyes of the law, you can't do anything to these people. And who knows? Maybe Melanie is going to end up showing up on the stand, maybe not in Lori's trial, but in Chad's trial, and getting herself a little bit of immunity.
As we know with immunity, Zulema has immunity, but her immunity is only for Arizona. Melanie Gibb does not have immunity. And I don't know about anyone else.
Nope.
Melanie, I don't think anybody else has it, do they?
Not that I know of, no.
I'm not understanding how more of these people aren't involved or embroiled in legal issues at this point, but I digress.
Well, when all this ends and, Lori and Chad have been dealt what the law feels they should be dealt. Nothing is stopping Kay and Larry Woodcock from taking the Melanies, Zulema, and other people to civil court. And civil court is a lot different than, criminal court. As we've seen, OJ might have not gotten convicted, but they sure fucked him with the money.
Let's see. In terms of testimonies, then we had Douglas, who's a forensic accountant with the FBI. Basically, he discussed the Venmo payments. Colby had requested that Tylee send him the Venmo payment. Tylee responded that she did not have the funds in her account and that Lori was receiving her money.
Well, okay, but let's look at this. Chad was having dreams and telling Lori that Charles Vallow was going to get into an accident and that Charles was going to die and JJ was going to be hurt.
That's true, huh?
So Chad could have been also feeding her shit. Like, I had this dream that Tylee is going to meet her end because she needs her spirit freed from the zombies that have captured her.
I can see that, honestly.
So again, it's the state is so setting Chad up, and not setting Chad up as a patsy, but, just it's like this huge chess game, right? And you have to set your pieces up. So when you say checkmate, it's done.
It's becoming, pretty clear. I mean, so far, almost every single witness has been like, really put a lot more of the blame, I would say, at least from what I'm gathering from their words on Chad.
It is because Chad sent the email. Chad convinced Lori of this. Chad convinced Zulema of this. Chad convinced Melanie. Chad was very instrumental in what Alex did. Chad's the one that called about Charles Vallow being, cremated. So, he's the one with the dreams and the prophecies. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and Lori ate it up immediately. She was on his side immediately. It's so sad. Then we had Scott Cowden, who was a firefighter with Chandler, Arizona. Actually, the next couple, like two people, Scott Cowden and Detective Sandra Inklin were both from the Chandler Police Department. One a firefighter, one an officer. They talked about the day that Charles Vallow was shot. They knew, Alex lied, and he had not attempted CPR. He had no blood on his hands, which if you were to do CPR on a gunshot victim, you're going to have blood on your hands. Inklin with the Chandler Police Department, she interviewed Lori and Tylee, and she said that Lori was happy, upbeat. At one point, she was laughing, just nonchalant. A direct quote, didn't really seem to be bothered by the fact that she and her daughter were present for the murder of her estranged ex-husband. And do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh my God. Okay, so this just completely blows my mind. Seeing somebody shot is not an easy thing to see. Okay, so for Tylee, younger brain, maybe her brain is like, yeah, nope, you didn't see that, you're okay, we're not focusing on that. And being trained by a mom who is constantly, well, you know what? No, that's not what you thought you saw. That's not what you're thinking. It's this, this, and this. Her brain probably went into that fight or flight mode, and it decided to fly. It was like, fuck this, I'm not thinking about it. With Lori, again, I have seen parents come in and identify their children. And I have seen some break down and you have to literally pick them off the floor. And I've seen others come in and go, yep, that's him. And then walk away. So you can't form an opinion if this person is how they felt about someone else by how they're reacting to trauma, because everybody handles trauma differently, right? But the questioning that, or the interview that was done, the questions that were asked, and I'm sure a lot of us have watched those interviews.
Oh, yes.
You can clearly tell that Lori didn't give a shit.
At all. She did not care.
And Tylee was still trying to put together what the fuck happened. Because in her mind, she was protecting her mom And she was part of that rescue of her mom. So in her brain, she's thinking what happened is not bad because I helped protect mom. But with Lori, and again, it's a young mind, right? That frontal lobe is not developed completely.
Exactly.
And it's very, some of the questions that Tylee was asked were very leading.
Agreed. I noticed that immediately.
Extremely leading. And just like with, anything with a teenager or a child, when you are asking them questions in a certain way, they want to please you. As toddlers and children, probably up to about 10, you want to please that adult. So you're going to give them the answers they want to hear, especially if you lead them. For teenagers, some may want to please that adult in authority, but others are like, can we just get this fucking done? If I tell you what you want to hear, are we done? Okay. Because I had that happen with me and my kids a couple of times, asking questions. They're like, yeah, here, whatever, mom. Are we done?
Yeah,
literally
exactly.
saying that. Are we done?
Should I still say that as a grown adult? Because that's a happy coping mechanism, right?
It is. It really is. So, yeah, a lot of those questions were leading, and it was hard to kind of tell if Tylee was really even, those little toys that you could pop together. I don't think she was popping them together. I think she was having a hard time. But yeah, Lori didn't give a fuck at all.
No.
And that's what the detective said.
Yeah, she was like, she didn't really seem to be bothered by it. And as you and I have been recording this episode, Iris, I just got a news update on my phone. Oh. And quite literally, the headline is, number of bodies exhumed from suspected Kenyan cult graves jumps to 47. And the very first line is, earlier this month, police rescued 15 members of the group, worshippers at the Good News International Church, who said they had been told to starve themselves to death. And they willingly did it. They willingly tried to starve themselves to death. And then apparently there's a bunch of people who did die from starvation. But these are people who willingly starved themselves to death for their beliefs. So why is it so outside the realm to believe that Lori Vallow can overlook the murder of her own children?
Well, if Jim Jones had been a woman, I think...
man.
History would have played out a lot differently.
Had Jim Jones been a woman, there would be a lot fewer men telling women to get into the kitchen.
Yeah.
That would be, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Sorry. Not trying to be offensive, but I cracked myself up. Anyway. And that's it for part 1, guys. Again, thank you for listening. You've been listening to We Saw the Devil, a discussion of week 2 of the Lori Vallow trial. Part 2 is going to release in just a couple hours, so be on the lookout for that. Later this week, the 4th episode of the Dark Side of Disney series will be airing. It got pushed back a little bit because this episode took precedent. So much going on in the Lori Vallow case, and that obviously took priority. But thank you guys so much again for listening. Don't forget, you can check us out on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just We Saw the Devil. And I will see you later this week. Until next crime.